Hello and welcome. I'm glad you're here today, in this little pocket of time that we can share. While you're watching, hands will be busy somewhere off screen, cutting, stitching, brushing color over a small, serious face. But this story is meant for listening. You don't have to follow every movement. You can just let the words drift past, the way a moth passes through the edge of lamplight and disappears again into the dark. A visitor from the edge of the lamp. There is a certain hour in the evening when the room stops pretending to be practical. The plants curl themselves into deeper green. The bookshelf turns into a row of sleeping houses. The mug on the table is no longer just a mug, but a tiny steaming cauldron for one. And the lamp, the quiet, ordinary lamp, becomes a small sun with very patient gravity. That is the hour when the moth folk wake. They're not quite insects and not quite people, more like stray thoughts that grew a body, or bits of dusk that decided to stay. Their wings are heavy with dusted patterns, eyes like tired stars, hands made for holding on to curtain edges and old letters. One of them has been waiting a long time to step fully into this world. If you glance at the screen, you might see the first signs of him now: a pair of thin legs, a knit sweater, a coat that is not yet a coat, only loose curls of wool and fabric. But in the story, he is already whole. His name is Corin Moth, or at least that's what he answers to when someone is kind enough to ask. Corin lives in the thin places of houses, between the window and the plant leaves, in the space under a desk where your bare feet look for a place to rest, on the high top shelf where no one quite remembers what is stored. He doesn't guard anything important in the usual sense, not money, not secrets, not keys. He keeps watch over light. Not the strong light of noon. He prefers the fragile kind, a desk lamp left on for company, the bluish rectangle of a phone face down on a blanket, the faint shimmer of a hallway nightlight someone forgot to unplug. Anywhere light is a little uncertain, anywhere it could go out and might not be missed, that is where you'll find him. On the table in front of me, a wire armature bends into the suggestion of a spine and shoulders. It looks clumsy, but Corin is already examining it with distant curiosity. He says, in the voice of a moth considering a curtain. All this for one life? Just this body, I tell him. You've had your life for a while now. He nods, as if he remembers. Maybe he does. Maybe he's been hovering for months in the corners of my thoughts, landing on half-finished sketches and old photographs until I finally noticed. Layer by layer, padding and fabric begin to wrap over wire, as though someone is teaching a twig how to be warm. Thin legs, narrow arms, hands that will never quite close into fists. He doesn't need fists. Corin's hands are meant for catching the delicate things that fall out of people's days. A forgotten idea, a half-made decision, the small sigh just before someone changes their mind. Where do you think all of that goes? Some of it becomes dust under beds. Some of it becomes wrinkles in pillowcases. And some of it, if it is especially tender, finds its way into the pockets of moth folk like him. He keeps those things safe for a while, pressed against his chest under layers of felt and wool. He doesn't fix them. He's not that kind of magic. He simply keeps them from disappearing completely until the person who lost them is ready, perhaps years later, to remember, once I wanted this, and feel a quiet, surprising warmth. The camera may show you scraps of fabric now, Browns like tree bark after rain, soft creams, a little lace, curls of wool that look like smoke caught on thorns. This is the beginning of his coat. Moth folk wear remarkable coats. They don't look expensive. There is nothing shiny or new about them. But if you could turn time sideways and read it the way a moth reads a lampshade, you'd see that every fiber is dyed with evenings. There, that dark patch near the collar is the color of the hour a child finally falls asleep after a long day that was just a bit too loud. That faint ring along the hem is the shadow of a phone turned face down so that, for once, a conversation can finish without interruption. The roughened, brushed parts over the shoulders are from the nights when someone stands on a balcony, wrapped in a blanket, telling the stars things they are not ready to tell another person. I stitch and felt and pull and smooth, but in the story, he is the one choosing which evenings to wear. "Not that one," murmurs Corin, as my hand hovers over a piece that is too shiny, too confident. It's bright, but it burns out quickly. I won't borrow light that leaves people empty. He is very particular. Moth folk know the difference between light that nourishes and light that exhausts. They can feel it with the soft antennae of their attention. Their favorite glow is the kind that says, "You can rest now," not the kind that screams, "Do more, be more, stay awake." So the coat grows heavier with patient, ember-like colors, the brown of tea stains, the gray of old sweaters, the gold from around the edges of a faded picture frame. By the time it drapes over his slight shoulders, Corin looks like he has stepped out of a forgotten corner of your grandmother's house, carrying the smell of books and wool and rain-soaked wool again. A head takes shape beneath my fingertips, round and pale, with a long, mothish nose and a mouth that rarely quite closes. There is always something unsaid resting there. The most careful part is always the eyes. Corin's eyes are not the bright, wide eyes of a storybook hero. They're the kind that stay half-lidded, watching from the side of the scene. Tired, but gentle. A little suspicious of the day, a lot in love with the night. I paint layers of color, gray-blue, a touch of hazel, a tiny rim of red as though he's been awake too long, a thin white dot on each for the reflection of a lamp. In his own world, his eyes are with him before any paint. They are lanterns, but turned inward. Moth folk don't see people the way we do. They see where the light is leaking out. When Corin visits a room, he doesn't notice your hair or your clothes first. He notices the dim patches, the place in your gaze where hope has gone a little thin, the way your shoulders slump over a certain email, a certain message thread, a certain corner of the room you avoid. He doesn't judge. He has no talent for judging. His whole purpose is to keep small lights company when they're close to going out. Sometimes that means sitting very quietly on a bookshelf near a plant that is nearly dead from forgetfulness, humming a song that only roots can hear. Sometimes it means perching on the edge of a desk and staring steadily at someone's hands until they remember to unclench them. Sometimes, very rarely, it means turning his own coat inside out and letting the evenings he's collected spill into the air like slow-motion fireflies, so that a tired person suddenly feels, for no particular reason, that maybe they can face one more hour. In the video, you might just see me painting darker shadows under his eyes, softening the edge of his mouth, adding a tiny line that could be worry or tenderness, depending on the angle. But underneath, he is learning how to look at you correctly, not as a problem to solve or a project to improve, but as a fragile, flickering lamp that is already enough just by being on. There is a place somewhere between the attic and the sky where moth folk are born. No one knows exactly where it is. There are rumors, a city of chimneys, a forest of television antennae, a quiet gap in the clouds just above the top floor of old buildings. What we do know is this: whenever someone leaves a small light on just in case, a moth child feels a pull. Not every light becomes a person, not every person grows wings, but sometimes when the timing is right and the night is kind, a bit of that soft, unnecessary glow curls into a shape. Arms, legs, hair like dust, eyes like the back of a spoon. Corin grew out of a hallway lamp that someone never got around to replacing with a more efficient model. It was the kind of lamp that buzzed slightly and made the wallpaper look kinder than it was. It kept watch over late returns and early departures, over the long, lonely stretch from kitchen to bedroom when a heart is too worried to rest. For years, it did this simple job, unnoticed but not unneeded. One winter, the person who lived there started leaving it on all night. There were bad dreams in the house, waiting for news, waiting for answers, waiting for something to become less painful. The hallway filled up with sighs and half-spoken prayers, with footsteps that paced and then stopped in the doorway, as if afraid to go either forward or back. The lamp did its quiet best. And bit by bit, the extra hours of duty, the tremble of feet on cold tiles at 3 in the morning, the way the light wrapped itself around shoulders hugging themselves, all soaked into the glow. It thickened. It learned the weight of worry and the shape of hope that refuses to lie down. And one night, while the house was, for once, asleep, that glow slipped from the bulb, poured down the cord like honey, and pooled on the floor. When it cooled, there was a small figure standing there, in a coat of hallway brown and eyes that had already seen more tears than any new thing should. He took his first step, and dust shook from the skirting boards. He took his second, and the nightmares in the bedroom dimmed. By his third step, he knew his job, not to banish pain, but to sit beside it, like a lamp no one bothers to turn off, and stay. Back at the table, a small knitted sweater slips over his shoulders. Laces curl around ankles. A hooded cap settles against painted hair, soft horns of wire shaping invisible antennae. He looks prepared for cold, though his world is made of indoor nights, not snow. Corin's days, which are actually nights, follow no schedule anyone else would recognize. He doesn't do breakfast or lunch, doesn't commute, doesn't have a boss. He simply appears where he is pulled. A thin line of light under a door will call him faster than a trumpet. There are certain places he returns to again and again. One is a student's desk crowded with books, screens, cups of tea gone cold. The student thinks they are alone with their fear of not being enough. They don't see the tiny figure sitting cross-legged on the desk lamp, swinging his legs, watching their trembling pen. When they finally write one sentence that feels honest instead of impressive, the moth person smiles, the bulb warms, the words come a little easier. Another favorite spot is a narrow windowsill in a building where someone is grieving. They don't cry all the time. There are bills to pay, dishes to wash, calls to answer with a steady voice. But at night, when the light of the phone becomes too harsh and the darkness of the room too sharp, they sit by the window and stare at nothing, one hand loosely holding the curtain. Corin sits on the curtain rod above, his coat spread out like extra shadow. He is not there to make anything better. This is important. He is there so that this moment, this painful, private, necessary moment, does not happen in an empty room. Moth folk know there are sorrows that do not want to be fixed. They only want a witness with soft eyes. So he watches. He memorizes the shape of their shoulders when they finally release a breath they have been holding all day. He notes the exact color of the streetlight pooling around their feet. Later, when he feels someone somewhere else beginning to fray, he can unwrap this stored evening from his coat and let a thread of that remembered bravery brush their cheek. It feels, from the inside, like suddenly realizing, others have survived this kind of ache. Perhaps I will too. He never takes credit. He is shy in that way. In the video, you might see me adjusting the angle of his head, making sure his legs hang in a way that suggests he could either land or leap at any moment. I sew tiny buttons, tuck in loose threads, and fuss with the fall of his cloak. But in the story, we're not only building a body, we're preparing a place for him to exist. Because Corin cannot live in a studio forever, moth folk need a lamp to orbit, a human or two to worry over. Without that, their coats grow heavy with unused evenings, and their wings forget how to catch drafts of feeling. So as I work, I find myself wondering where he will eventually rest. Maybe he'll end up in a quiet home office near a plant that gets too little light in winter. He'll stand beside the monitor, his painted eyes tilted slightly away from the deadlines displayed, paying more attention to the person's clenched jaw, the way their fingers hover above the keyboard before sending an email they are afraid of. Maybe he'll live on a narrow shelf above a piano, watching someone practice the same passage over and over, hands stiff with self-criticism, until finally they allow one imperfect but wholehearted note to ring, and the room relaxes. Maybe he will be placed near a bed, where a child who is no longer quite a child lies awake, afraid of both monsters and the future, staring at the corner where the wall meets the ceiling. Wherever he goes, he'll learn the particular flavor of light there, the way morning slides in through the curtains, the color of blue that happens right before the alarm, the soft orange triangle on the floor that means a door has been left ajar and someone is not truly alone. And he will add all that to his coat, stitch by almost invisible stitch. It takes time to shape a pair of wings that look like they belong to both a moth and a person. From some angles, they seem made of wool and felt and thread. From others, they're clearly made of all the evenings that were too shy to call themselves beautiful. Moth wings are not loud. They don't shout their colors. They hold patterns meant to be seen only by those who bother to look closely. Corin's wings carry the marks of eyes, rounded shapes that echo old superstitions of protection. In the story, these are real eyes of a sort. When he wraps himself fully in his coat, the wings fold over his chest, the eyes on them close, and everything he has seen, the teacups, the textbooks, the crying in stairwells, the laughter that happens while someone believes they are alone, is stored in a safe, dark place. When he spreads them, those eyes open again. They don't look at you directly. They look past you, into the part of the room where you have left something of yourself abandoned. An unfinished painting, a notebook you're afraid to open, a knitting project that went wrong in row 20 and has been quietly accusing you from its basket ever since. Corin's wings are very good at spotting these and nudging them gently back towards your hands. Not with force, never with force. He might make a draft that stirs a page. He might tilt his head so that the light falls in a particular way on the forgotten thing. He might, on daring nights, whisper all the way across the room, "Where did you go?" And suddenly, for no logical reason, you'll find yourself standing up, crossing the floor, touching the waiting work, feeling both guilty and strangely relieved. Moth folk don't care whether you finish, they care that you remember you wanted to. Every doll, every guardian, every small magical being has a moment when they quietly decide who they belong to. From the outside, it looks like a practical choice. Someone saw a photograph online, visited a studio, or opened a box from the post. But inside the story, it is always the other way around. Corin studies many faces before he makes up his mind. He watches the way people look at their own hands. He listens for the kind of sigh that holds both exhaustion and tenderness. He's not looking for a perfect person. That would bore him terribly. He's looking for someone who leaves small lights on for others, even on nights when no one thanks them. Someone who has almost given up on being comforted themselves. When he finds such a person, his coat tightens around him with a little shiver of decision. "Ah, that one," he says softly. He does not explain his choice, he simply makes sure that out of all the images and shelves and possibilities, he ends up in their path. Perhaps they spot him unexpectedly while scrolling and feel a faint, irrational sense of recognition, like seeing an old friend from school in a crowded station. Perhaps they walk past a stall or a gallery, and their feet stop on their own, eyes caught by this odd, solemn creature with dusted wings and a coat the color of late evenings. However it happens, once he has picked you, your house is no longer quite unobserved. This is not meant to be creepy. Corin is a very polite watcher. He is more like a second, quieter heart, standing at the edge of things. He sees when you finally close your laptop because you cannot pretend to care about one more email. He notices the way your shoulders drop when you drink the first mouthful of water of the day that is not flavored with caffeine or guilt. He keeps track of how often you offer kindness you do not feel you've earned yourself. And in the spaces between, when you sit on the floor with your back against the bed, or stare at the ceiling after turning off your phone, or wash dishes in a rhythm that is almost prayer, he keeps you company. You might forget he's there for days at a time. That's all right. He has a very patient job. By now in the video, it's only small things left. The tilt of the hat, a last touch of color, a loose thread cut away. Corin is ready, standing or sitting among leaves and fabrics, and he knows he's not alone. Somewhere on your side of the screen, at a desk, in bed, in the kitchen, you gave a little piece of your evening to this quiet, strange world. You could have filled it with noise. Instead, you stayed with a small creature whose only real task is to honor fragile lights. Moth folk notice that. They fold such moments into their coats. So tonight, if you like, imagine this. On a shelf, on a plant leaf, or just at the edge of your thoughts, a figure in a heavy coat settles in. Knees tucked up, wings wrapped close, lantern eyes half open, watching over your room exactly as it is, messy or tidy, loud or still, and deciding it is worth keeping company. He won't fix everything. He offers something smaller and stranger, to be there for the late-night worries, the unfinished thoughts, the quiet hopes you hardly dare name, just presence. Sometimes that is enough. Thank you for spending this time with Corin. I wish you at least one gentle, honest light for the rest of your day or your night. Until next time, be kind to your lamps, inside and out.